Late Sunday, heavy bombardment was reported in Gaza City. Shortly before midnight local time, broadcaster Al Jazeera said correspondent al-Sharif was killed in a strike. According to Associated Press, Rami Mohanna, administrative director at the nearby Shifa Hospital, said the strike hit a tent for Al Jazeera journalists outside the hospital's walls. Along with al-Sharif, 3 other journalists and a driver were killed. Israel's military confirmed it, asserting al-Sharif had posed as a journalist and alleging he was with Hamas, which al-Sharif had denied. The Committee to Protect Journalists last month said it was gravely concerned for his safety and said he was targeted by an Israeli military smear campaign. The Al Jazeera presenter reporting the news said 4 of the broadcaster's journalists have been murdered in a targeted Israeli strike.
Let us get you up to speed with this breaking news coming out of Gaza, where 4 Al Jazeera journalists have been murdered in a targeted Israeli strike. Anas al-Sharif, Mohammed Koraika, cameraman Ibrahim Zafar and assistant Mohammed Nofal were killed. Anas was murdered after a tent for journalists was hit outside the main gate of the hospital. The well-known Al Jazeera correspondent reported extensively from northern Gaza. The 28-year-old was a key source of news from Gaza City and the north for international audiences since Israel's war on the Strip began some 22 months ago.
A magnitude 6.1 earthquake struck Turkey's northwestern province of Balıkesir on Sunday, causing about a dozen buildings to collapse, an official said. At least 2 people were trapped in the debris of a collapsed building. According to Associated Press, the earthquake, with an epicenter in the town of Sindurgi, sent shocks that were felt some 200 kilometers to the north in Istanbul, a city of more than 16 million people. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Agency said the earthquake was followed by several aftershocks, including one measuring 4.6, and urged citizens not to enter damaged buildings. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan issued a statement wishing all affected citizens a speedy recovery. "May God protect our country from any kind of disaster," he wrote on X. Turkey sits on top of major fault lines and earthquakes are frequent. In 2023, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake killed more than 53,000 people in Turkey and destroyed or damaged hundreds of thousands of buildings in 11 southern and southeastern provinces. Another 6,000 people were killed in the northern parts of neighboring Syria.
Allah'ım, her yer yıkıldı. Allah'ım, Allah'ım. Allah'ım. Yıkıldı. Allah'ım.
Panik yok.
Allah'ım, her yer yıkıldı. Allah'ım, Allah'ım. Allah'ım. Yıkıldı.
A scandal has erupted over Sergey Lavrov, one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's former associates. The Russian Foreign Ministry has launched an investigation into the alleged leaking of classified information in the diplomatic corps abroad. Russian media report that the Federal Security Service has been involved in the investigation into the structure headed by Sergey Lavrov for 20 years. The investigation began with the dismissal of Mikhail Bogdanov, the Russian deputy foreign minister, who was unexpectedly dismissed a few days ago. Mikhail Bogdanov's loss of his post as deputy foreign minister and special representative for the Middle East is not due to his age, as he claims, but to a more serious incident, the leakage of highly classified information abroad. If Bogdanov is also formally charged, it will be the first time in modern history that such a high-ranking person from Sergey Lavrov's circle will come under the control of the investigation. This will be a serious blow to Sergey Lavrov's career, and a serious cleansing will begin in the entire foreign ministry system. Lavrov's health did not allow him to work as before, and the news that he will be dismissed is not new. The position of the foreign minister is largely symbolic. According to the Russian constitution, the president is responsible for foreign policy. In this sense, the foreign ministry is simply an apparatus that carries out the instructions of the head of state. But the latest scandal confirms the claims that Lavrov's health has significantly weakened the diplomat's work rate and position. Lavrov has been wanting to quit for several years now, and has repeatedly sent messages to the state leadership that he is tired. Sources are sure that the minister's condition has deteriorated so much that it negatively affects his work. He often gets angry and is often in a bad mood. This also leads to Lavrov's frequent outbursts and diplomatic scandals. It is also reported that a plan has already been developed for Lavrov's treatment in one of the best clinics in Israel. Recall that Lavrov's son-in-law and daughter are Israeli citizens. The new head of the Russian Foreign Ministry is said to be Kirill Dmitriev, the general director of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. It also seems possible that the appointment of State Duma Speaker Vyacheslav Volodin and director of the Foreign Intelligence Service Sergei Naryshkin to this position.
Russian Z propagandist Anastasia Kashevarova, who is closely connected to the Russian military, has publicly admitted that an epidemic of hepatitis C, a viral infection that affects the liver, has begun in the ranks of the Russian army. The situation, according to her, is so tragic that other dangerous infections, including HIV and tuberculosis, are also spreading en masse among Russians at the front. And all this against the backdrop of the continuing replenishment of the army, with prisoners and marginalized people recruited through accelerated mobilization schemes. There is currently an epidemic of hepatitis C in the army. Hepatitis does not manifest itself immediately. Not only fellow soldiers are at risk, but also loved ones and relatives when a soldier is on leave at home. Kashevarova warns on her Telegram channel. According to her, the Russian army lacks not only treatment, but even basic prevention. Soldiers with hepatitis and HIV continue to serve on an equal basis with everyone else, ending up in the same trenches, on the same operating tables, transmitting viruses through wounds and blood transfusions. There is no treatment in the army. No one registers anyone, writes Kashevarova. She pays special attention to how not only sick people, but also deliberately marginal groups end up in the combat zone. Former prisoners, drug addicts, representatives of criminal communities. In some units, according to her data, drugs are circulating en masse, leading to new infections. Civilians should really think about the threat of an epidemic of socially dangerous diseases, writes Kashevarova. All this creates not only a threat to combat capability. Soldiers weakened by illnesses cannot fight effectively, but also poses a real sanitary threat to all of Russia. The infected return home, carry viruses to the hinterland, and transmit them to their families and others. Against this background, the Kremlin's usual statement about the secondary army of the world looks especially comical. In practice, this is an army without an elementary medical system, without taking into account the infected, with an epidemic inside. Furthermore, the Russian military is suffering an epidemic of tuberculosis among soldiers who have served in the war in Ukraine. Local media have reported. The Moscow Times said a likely reason for the outbreak is the recruitment of prisoners to serve at the front. Tuberculosis is widespread in prison. Every third person is sick. The paper quoted a military patient who had previously worked as a prison officer as saying, "And when they went to war en masse, the doctors at the hospital said that before that it was almost empty, a maximum of 10 people on a floor, and now there are queues for hospitalization. There are not enough beds."